Welcome back to the news at 4. Almost 2 months after 4 University of Idaho students were murdered, police say they were able to tie a suspect to the crime scene through DNA left behind, video surveillance of his car, and cell phone records. 28-year-old Brian Kohberger was extradited from Pennsylvania, where he was arrested at his family home and made his first court appearance in Idaho yesterday. He's charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of burglary. He's accused of killing Kaylee Gonzalez, Madison Mogan, Ethan Chapin, and Xana Kernodle. Our Morgan Romero has been in Moscow all week long and shares more insight into the court documents released so far. Morgan, as well as what comes next.
Yeah, before we get to that, Shira, I want to let you know we are outside the crime scene right now, that home at 1122 King Road, where those 4 murders of the University of Idaho students happened, just off the campus. Private investigators have been here throughout the day. I'm going to step out of the way so you can see a couple of their cars. There's one man who pulled up not too long ago. He's got Kootenai County plates. I asked him who hired him, but he would not tell me who hired him, just confirming he was a private investigator. I interviewed former Idaho Attorney General David Leroy today, who tells me the defense just sent in their own investigators to start to investigate the crime scene on their own. Leroy says it's still very early on in the investigation from both sides, both the prosecution and the defense. But today, more documents were released in the case, just a few pages as opposed to the probable cause affidavit, 18 pages long, that was released yesterday. Those documents that were released today showed that a week ago, Kohberger's public defender asked for the judge to preserve evidence and preserve the crime scene, being this home. The judge signed off on that on December 30th, meaning the house will be locked and crime scene tape will stay up. Crews were cleaning up the home, but that was halted as well last week. The judge ordered the house to be preserved until February 1st or until further order from the court. The most detailed document that's come out of the case so far, as I mentioned, was the PCA that was released yesterday in support of the arrest warrant of Kohberger. The 18-page document outlined why police believe Kohberger is the one who killed Kaylee, Maddie, Xana, and Ethan on November 13th. The amount of digital and scientific evidence it appears investigators collected during their investigation and outlined in that document surprised both Leroy and University of Idaho law professor Shakira Sanders. Sanders told me told me today that we do not often see this much detail in a PCA because probable cause is a low standard of review. It is not the same as beyond a reasonable doubt, which prosecutors must prove to criminally convict. Sanders says the PCA could be lengthy for a few reasons: because there were 4 heinous murders being investigated, because if Kohberger is found guilty, he could face the death penalty, and because the investigation itself was lengthy.
It's very likely that this is the tip of the iceberg with regards to the evidence that is there. But let's not forget, right? Statements in an affidavit is not evidence that you can take into court at a trial. So in addition to the statements, what we're going to see develop are all of the witnesses who gave this information, all of the digital information to be presented later at a trial.
If there is a trial. Sanders says if the government can support everything in the affidavit beyond a reasonable doubt, being witness testimony, DNA, video surveillance, cell phone records, she thinks there is enough probable cause. But so far, we only have one side of this case, and Leroy says it's important that we all remember Kohberger is presumed innocent at this stage. Moving forward, he has a status conference January 12th, as we reported yesterday, followed by a preliminary hearing. They'll set the date for that at the status conference. Prelim hearings are also known as probable cause hearings. So if Kohberger chooses to have a preliminary hearing, Leroy says the defense will be able to cross-examine and present their own evidence.
Well, the prosecution will present that kind of evidence in this case. It's already been presented in the arrest warrant, but the defense will hire its own DNA experts. The defense will also look at what's called chain of custody to see whether the evidence taken at the scene was properly collected, whether it was followed all the way through to a scientific laboratory, whether the laboratory used proper procedures, whether the technicians were working on it were properly expert. And all of those things are subject to not only second guessing, but expert rebuttal by the defense's experts. So all of those pieces of evidence, even those to a high degree of probability scientifically, are subject to contest by the defense.
As I briefly alluded to, it is not guaranteed this case will go to trial. In fact, less than 5% of criminal cases go to trial because people plead guilty or they make plea deals. So we may be learning most information in this case, like a possible motive or connection to the victims, through court records rather than through trial. Because Kohberger's charges carry the possibility of a death penalty, Sanders says that there are several more layers to this as well, and the court has to certainly be concerned about his due process rights. Shira.
All right, Morgan Romero live in Moscow. Thank you.